Hello, everyone, and welcome back after my day off yesterday. Sorry I didn't upload a video. My wife and I have been traveling, and we're kind of settled into where we are now, but not totally, which is why we don't have any video today. Hopefully that'll be back soon, but just trying to get everything kind of squared away and ready. And then video shall return, Lord willing. Today we're talking about Psalm 63. And you can, of course, download the outline on our website at tobelikechrist.com. Psalm 63 is once again a Psalm of David, and once again, we don't have any New Testament references back to Psalm 63. We do have some themes, of course, to discuss. The first one, hunger and thirst for knowledge of God and God's presence. Number 2, satisfaction found in worship and meditation on God. So there's a hunger, and then there's an explanation of how to satiate that hunger, how to satisfy it. David's going to talk about that here. Definitions, we've seen both of these in previous chapters. So in verse 7, we have this term, shadow of your wings. When baby chickens or baby birds sense a threat, they run to their mother hen, and she'll cover them with their wings to protect them. In the Bible, God is described as doing the same thing for his saints. He protects them figuratively from danger and from evil. And then we have the term jackal again. We saw this in a previous chapter. I can't remember where exactly, but jackals are small, medium-sized canines. They're related to dogs and wolves. They kind of look like foxes, if you're familiar with the North American fox, maybe a little bit bigger. They are similar to coyotes, although they are generally a little bit smaller than that. So in the Bible, they're commonly associated with places that have been abandoned or desolate places. We've got 11 verses in chapter 63, and we do have just a little hint of context. It doesn't tell us a lot, just a little, though. The context is that David wrote this psalm while he was in the wilderness of Judah. Now, there's a couple potential times when that could have been, so don't have all the details. Our 11 verses today are entitled, My Soul Thirsts for God. David starts Psalm 63 expressing his need for God. He expressed it with language that's familiar to pretty much everybody, and that was the language of physical hunger and physical thirst. He says in verse 1, My soul thirsts for God, my flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So to satisfy this longing for God, David went to God's sanctuary, which I think here refers to the tabernacle, where God was worshipped every day, where the sacrifices were offered. David also says that when he was lying on his bed, he meditated on God's goodness and his steadfast love. And David's soul was satisfied, quote, as with fat and rich food. So again, he starts the chapter with this idea of hunger, and he says, in going to the tabernacle and observing the worship and praising God and lying on my bed and meditating about God, that hunger that I had has been satisfied, like richly satisfied. Rich food, it says, as with fat and rich food in verse 5. David reminisced about all the times that God had helped him in the past, and it caused him to cling to God, the text says. David trusted that God's power would eventually defeat his enemies, and God would exalt him as the king. David was the king of Israel. Or potentially, if this was an earlier psalm of his, he would be the king of Israel. He had received that promise, so he's confident that God was going to fulfill it. So a question for application as we close, and it comes from verse 6. What do you meditate about while you're lying on your bed? Do you ever give your mind time to meditate, to think deeply about something, to think more than just, kind of on the surface level? I know a lot of us, myself included, sometimes many of us just grab our phones or computers every time we have a minute of downtime. The minutes before we fall asleep are spent on TikTok or Facebook or reading the latest headlines or, maybe reading some book. But what if we took 10 minutes of that time every day to meditate on God? His nature, his goodness, his vastness, his providence, his patience, his ways, and any other number of things that we could be thinking about. I suspect that if we were to do that, just a short period of daily meditation on God would significantly increase our appreciation for him in our day-to-day lives. If we want to enjoy the rich relationship with God that David had, we need to devote ourselves to thinking about God as often as David did. And a lot of times that takes a pause. It takes us taking conscious effort to say, I'm going to set aside all the things that just kind of pop into my mind on the surface level, and I'm going to consciously think about greater things. And I think when you do that, it usually doesn't take very long for you to be somewhat overwhelmed with admiration of God, with the smallness of yourself, with your place in the world. It's not hard to get to those higher thoughts, but it does take us just setting that time aside consciously, and being intentional about doing it. Because certainly the world will distract you with a million thoughts, and if you never take time to do it, you never get to those better thoughts.